Good morning and Happy New Year. I'm Kimberly Bishop, Associate State Director at AARP Michigan. Thank you for joining us this morning as we kick off our first Learn a Latte session for 2022. If this is your first time, we host informational sessions on topics important to those 50 and older and their families on the first and third Wednesday of each month at 10 o'clock. Our topic today is right on time. We'll be talking about winter or cold weather safety for older adults. A 2019 survey conducted by AARP shows that 3 out of 4 adults age 50 and older want to stay in their homes and communities as they age. And we have some tips to help you remain at home safely as the temperatures drop. This morning, I'd like to welcome Tricia Comet. She's going to share some great information with us. Excuse me. Tricia has worked for 12 and a half years at Region 2 Area Agency on Aging, serving Lenawee, Jackson, and Hillsdale counties. Her current role as Housing and Transition Supervisor, Program Manager, as well as being a certified aging in place specialist through the National Association of Home Builders. She also serves as a board member for the Presbyterian Villages of Michigan. Prior to her current position, she worked as an activities specialist at Jackson County for 8 years, overseeing the senior centers and senior nutrition sites, as well as the development of enrichment activities based on dimensions of wellness, and also has a background in working in the mental health field. Tricia works to bring increased awareness regarding housing units within the community, including affordability, homelessness, and home safety. Her passion is working with individuals to develop ways that allow them to remain as independent as they are able in their desired setting with assistive technology and products to maintain accessibility. That is a mouthful, but what a great background. Welcome, Tricia. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
As I hear my furnace blowing and see the snow outside, I know that today's topic is relevant. I do have a few questions for you, but I'd also like to invite our viewers to type their questions into the comments section, and I'll ask the questions so that they can get answers real time. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
All right, well, let's get started. Okay, it's no secret. It's cold outside. I'm working remotely still and don't go out all that much these days. What should I do or think about before heading to the grocery store or if I need to run an errand?
I think the first one is to dress in layers. Michigan weather especially changes within the hour. And so sometimes if you don't dress in layers, you might not have enough warm clothing on. And it also helps us maintain our body temperature and we don't have that heat loss through, not having enough layers of clothing on. They also say not to stay immobile too long. So if you're just sitting in your house and not moving around, your blood doesn't get flowing. So your body's temperature is going to drop and you're going to get a little bit colder. And also to stay dry. A lot of times the clothing, you might be outside trying to shovel or the sleet's coming down and your clothing gets wet. That makes your body temperature drop fast. So, just be cautious of those kind of things. And a lot of people don't keep their indoor temperature warm enough. So they recommend at 68 degrees or higher. So I know a lot of people don't like that, but that's something really important to do. So
What are some of the health risks of cold weather?
in Michigan, our climate's so cold, there's different health risks everywhere. But in Michigan specifically, that we have the hypothermia, the frostbite that you have to watch for. And definitely the falls with winter related activities. You can just go out on your porch and have a fall. You can have a fall even without the snow and ice. So that's one thing you have to be cautious about. They say anything under 67 degrees Fahrenheit, you have to use caution. They try to stick to a range of 68 to 74 degrees. So if you can keep your clothing, kind of layered so you can maintain that body temperature, that's ideal. The hypothermia, that's with the older adults, sometimes their bodies lose heat more quickly, and sometimes they're not really aware that their body temperature isn't maintaining that heat. So that's a big caution with older adults.
Okay. I know that falls are a risk for anyone, but with snow and ice, the risk is even higher. What can people do to prevent falls on snow and ice? Because I don't even go get my mail every day anymore just because it's so cold outside.
Yes, definitely. So the biggest thing is to make sure your walkways and your sidewalks are clear. Your porch, having them cleared off, salted, some things like that. Some people are stubborn and like to do their own, even though they really shouldn't. So I think that just asking for help if you need help. That puts a lot of strain on your heart. So if you have different medical conditions, you have to be careful with those things. And sometimes I think people are scared to ask for help, or they don't feel like they need have anyone that can help. So I would say ask family, friends, neighbors. If you don't know, just call the area agency on aging or a church or something, so we can help find someone for you. Instead of just risking that. A big thing is to make sure you carry a cell phone if you are going to be outside doing shoveling, because you don't want to be on the ground and not have a way to contact someone or a lifeline or something like that. Walking slowly and taking short steps. And it's kind of funny, they say walk like a penguin. So if you can imagine, walking like a penguin, but that's one thing that's really important, because some studies have shown that over 50% of winter storm related activities are from falling on icy or snow covered areas. So another thing is if you use a cane or a walker, sometimes people don't really think about this. The rubber tip on the end of that, make sure that's not smooth and worn down, because that can be a fall hazard with that. So they recommend to replace those, and definitely wear boots or shoes with not skid soles on them. And this can happen to anyone. I just remember about 10 years ago, I had some boots and they were worn down, and I was out shoveling and, not thinking anything of it. And I had a fall. And it was just because my boot slipped out underneath me and I hit my head on the concrete porch
Oh,
and just
yeah.
laid there. So, I mean, it can happen to any age, but definitely when you're older, ask for help.
Wow, that will definitely make you think differently about shoes and boots.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I would wear even gym shoes because I felt like they had a little grip if I was just going to the mailbox or something, but hadn't thought about the fact that, maybe if they were worn down, that if they might be more of a hazard than not. What
Yeah.
about if someone's using a walker? I often see tennis balls on the end. Would that still work, or should they use something different?
I don't know the answers to that specifically, but I would think that the little rubber tips might be a little bit, they might grip the snow and ice a little bit better. I would definitely talk to a physician or a therapist, a physical therapist about that. Um, some people have more troubles and they might have a disability. So I always recommend that maybe they talk to their doctor to see if they can get like a temporary disability parking permit, if they have a long distance to walk between stores and doctors and things like that. So that might be an option too.
Okay, hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Great ideas. So, as we're talking about being outdoors, driving on snow and ice aren't my favorite things to do. Can you give us some tips on being safe while we're out on the road, whether we're driving or a passenger?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is to make sure you winterize your car before it gets too cold. So, check your antifreeze, your tires to make sure that's all good. The windshield wipers, a lot of them, people check the front ones and they might be okay, but then they have the back one and there's sleet and they didn't think about the back one. So, check those to make sure those are all good. I think there's some winter windshield wipers that you can actually have in Michigan that kind of help keep that ice and stuff off a little bit better than some of the just normal ones. Definitely carry a cell phone anywhere you go, so that people know where you are. There's some apps out there if people are worried about that you can have on your phone just in case of an emergency, so someone can locate you. They always recommend telling someone where you're going, kind of when you're going to be there and when you're going to be back, because you wouldn't want someone sitting on the side of the road not knowing where they are. So that's a big one. Sometimes people always look at the shortest route to get somewhere. They always say to look at the safest route. So in the winter, especially and on the icy roads, some of the more traveled roads, the bigger roads are um, safer because the snow melts off them faster. So just look at that. It's not necessarily always the shortest route, but the safest. So um, and if you do get stranded, they always say to, and this is kind of a tricky one. They always say to run your car at least 10 minutes every hour, but you have to crack your window, to keep warm. So, on top of having the emergency kit, if you have to start your car, you need to make sure there's nothing plugging your tailpipe and things like that. So, but the recommended is 10 minutes. So, and then
And
of course,
I was just gonna say I have like my brother and sister live about an hour from me, and I know sometimes I'm guilty of I'm jumping in the car, I'm going to see them. I have an attached garage, so I don't have to go outside to get to my car. And I may not take gloves or a hat because I think I'm just going from my house to theirs. But if something happens in between, I'd really be in trouble. So I often think about the fact that I need to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, they always say to put in, anything essential that you would need for traveling, an extra set of warm clothing, booster cables, a scraper for your windows, and actually a shovel and like cat litter or salt in case someone has to help you get your car out. Also a first aid kit. A lot of people don't really think about that in the winter, but if you are stranded and you need something, that's important to have. But yeah, definitely just making sure your car is ready for the winter and having those extra set of clothes that you really don't need to think about. You don't have to have them every day, but they're there if you need them, and blankets and things like that.
Great. I think we have some links that we'll be sharing. One is a video on driving in the winter, and also one on cold weather gear, so coats and jackets and things like that. Are there any other things that we should just consider generally for outdoor safety?
I think, the biggest thing is, like I said, dressing in layers. And that does include the boots, the longer winter coats, like a full winter coat. Some people think that their coat's a winter coat, and it's it's not. It's a fall coat or a spring coat, mittens and a hat to keep the warmth in your body. So that's the biggest things. And maybe a scarf and like blankets and things like that. So
Okay. Well, we've talked a bit about going outside, but let's talk about safety tips while staying at home. So I was thinking about this. On Christmas, I got a call from my sister to wish me a Merry Christmas, but she also let me know that her power had gone out. And for some reason, she's been dealing with a number of power outages in her area recently. So, what might someone do to prepare for power outages?
I think the biggest thing, and people have done this for a long time, and definitely during the pandemic, people have kind of stocked up on things more often than they have in the past, possibly. But definitely having an emergency kit so that it covers you for at least 3 days. So things that include in there would be like a battery operated radio, flashlight, extra batteries, um, and this one I thought was really important. A loud horn, a whistle, or a loud bell, because if you are stuck in a house or like a fire or something like that, you need someone to find you and they can't really find you. That would be something that you could grab and kind of notify people where you were, maybe. So foods that you can open and prepare without electricity easily. They say a gallon of water per person per day. Extra blankets, and then the first aid kit, definitely with extra medications that you may need. And one thing that I think is really important too, that a lot of people don't think about, is having an emergency contact list. So that if someone has to come in, they can just grab it off your wall and take it with you if you have to go to the hospital and things like that. And also just for yourself, people don't think they really need that. But if you were having a medical emergency and you needed to call your doctor or 911, it's just your brain doesn't work that fast when you might be in a panic mode. So that's important for everyone, I think, to have that.
I know we did a session in the fall on emergency preparedness just because it was Emergency Preparedness Month, but you can't just be prepared in September. You have to be prepared all year long. So just
Hmm.
like changing the batteries and smoke detectors and things like that. It's something that you have to make sure
Yeah.
that you keep current. And I don't know, I hope my sister's not watching as I'm, telling all her business, but back to Christmas, I was really glad that she called me and I invited her over, but she lives an hour away and didn't necessarily want to drive an hour away on Christmas. She wanted to wait it out at home. But how important is it to stay in touch with someone in a situation like this, especially if you live alone or maybe you have grandchildren, but you don't have another adult in the house who might be able to help should the emergency get to a more dire situation.
I think it's really important just to talk to someone, even every day. Sometimes you hear stories of people that haven't heard from someone in a couple of weeks, and they've been, might have had a fall, and no one knew. So I think communication is like the most important thing you can do for any emergency situation, just to prepare yourself, and it also kind of, keeps that social isolation away. So I think if you don't have someone to talk to, like a family or a friend, reach out to a church member, or if you're online, there's all kinds of support groups, or just people that have like different craft interests and things like that, just so that someone has eyes on you and can kind of be there if they don't hear from you. That would kind of let them know that, hey, something might be wrong, someone might want to check on that person. So that's very, very important.
Okay, I do have a couple of tips from our viewers that they're sharing. Janet shared that snow tires are something that she does every winter, so it's not necessarily a question,
Yeah.
but she's just sharing something that she does. And Gina, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Gina says that she wears her medical alert on the outside of her coat when she goes out where everyone can see it. I hadn't thought of that. That's a great idea, too. So let's see, come up with some other questions.
On the
No, go
same
ahead.
topic of that too, a lot of those medical alert buttons, just this is an inside the home thing, but a lot of those are waterproof, so people don't tend to wear them sometimes when they shower. But that's a big fall risk in the home is in the bathroom. So if you do have a life alert that is waterproof, please wear it when you shower also, because a lot of people take them off and then they fall and it's across the room. So, just that tip also.
And I touched on some of these a few minutes ago, but what kind of things should people do for routine safety and maintenance, but especially during cold weather?
So I think that you have the different carbon monoxide worries. So making sure you have a proper heat source. Making sure your dryer vents clean, having regular maintenance on your furnace and your fireplace, just so those hazards are kind of looked at, and you make sure that those don't happen. Sometimes during power outages, people might tend to use like a charcoal grill or a stove to heat their home, or kerosene and things like that, and they don't recommend those. If you do have electricity, a lot of people use the infrared heaters to keep their house kind of a constant warmer temperature. But definitely the generators and things like that, you have to really worry about the carbon monoxide coming into your home. So if you do use one of those, they say to use it at least 20 feet away from your home and your windows and your doors. So that's a huge risk. Always make sure you have a carbon monoxide detector around your sleeping areas of your home, along with the smoke detectors. And they always say to change the batteries, like you said, in the spring and fall. So to make sure those things are done. Um, one thing I've noticed going into different homes is, a lot of people in their foyer area, or like inside their outside door, they have like a tiled area to put their shoes and things like that. So I always recommend maybe looking at the non-skid strips that you can put there, because as you take your icy and snowy boots off, that floor gets really slippery, and that's a fall risk right there too. So that's another thing that you can look at doing.
So are you seeing, because you really provide direct services to older adults, are there different kinds of calls that seem to come in during the colder weather months?
Definitely. This year, especially, I am not sure why, if it's, the rent or the pandemic and things like that, or just loss of jobs. getting a lot more calls of people that are staying in their cars. So on those kind of situations, I would say to reach out to someone and let, an agency kind of help you figure it out, give some education on how to keep warm in your car if you're, refusing to go anywhere else or there's nowhere to go. So, we have different agencies around the communities that work with you to find housing and things like that. So just reach out to someone if you know someone that's like that, just so we can make sure that the needs are taken care of.
And often when the temperatures really drop, different communities will have warming centers, or maybe you can go to the mall or just different places to stay warm, at least during the day. So it really is important to check in your community and see what resources might be available.
Definitely.
Well, you have given us some really great tips today, Tricia. I am wondering what we've missed. Is there anything that you'd like to share that maybe I didn't ask about, or um, just something that our viewers should keep in mind about staying safe in the colder weather?
It's kind of related to the colder weather, but it's an inside thing too. I think one thing that people need to keep in mind, with using different heat sources and things like that is, um, during the pandemic with COVID, I've heard that there's some people that lose like their sense of smell. And that's a big risk. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out, even though it's not necessarily a cold weather risk, because it's really important to find different ways for those people to identify if their house caught on fire, because they can't really smell that, or like a gas leak and things like that. So maintenance of someone's home and having the eyes on to have someone else in there. If that does happen to people, I just want to make that a point, just because people aren't aware of that. So they wouldn't necessarily smell that smoke if something were to catch on fire. So.
Okay, we have a question from Teresa. She's looking for recommendations for a steep stairway that's uncarpeted. She's looking for the best surface for preventing falls. And we actually got some advice from one of our other viewers that says non-slip strips are a hazard of their own, but as a full non-slip mat is much better. So your thoughts on both of those, actually, since they're related?
Yeah, I think, as long as I definitely like the mats best. I worry about that. Sometimes you go in and someone thinks that they have a mat that would work well. You just have to make sure it's actually one made for that. So it's not, one that's going to be a trip hazard and someone falling over the edge, because it comes up on the edges. So as long as you have the right product, I think that definitely is a good option with that. And the strips, if you have nothing else, I think it's a good option. But if you have someone that kind of shuffles or things like that, that could definitely be a fall hazard too, because even like carpet, your foot can get caught up on that. So you just have to use caution with whatever you use. um, it's important to look at all those. So on the stairway, I'd have to look at that. It depends on how steep it is and things like that. There's different things that you'd want to look at to make sure you have the proper hand railings and they're at the right height, and not too far apart. You have one on both sides. So there's a bunch of different things that you look at with that. And they can contact me after this too if they want some different recommendations. I can kind of try to go through that, based on what the steps look like and things like that.
Okay, Teresa, we will be sure. Oh, actually, it's up there right now. You can contact Trisha at Region 2 at 517-592-1974. So, Teresa, feel free to reach out directly to Trisha to have a little bit more of a conversation about that so she can give you the best suggestions. Trisha, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. You gave us some great tips. You reminded us to make sure that we are dressed properly, making sure that if we're using any kind of assistive devices, to make sure that those rubber tips are not are still grippy, if that's a word, to make sure that they're still grippy. To be sure that we have first aid kits, not just in our home, but in our car, and making sure that we have things like blankets and salt or cat litter or something in our trunk just in case we need some traction or need a little help. Making sure that if we have medical alert or lifeline devices that we use them, and keeping in touch with people. And I had not really thought about it in terms of cold weather, but I wear an Apple Watch, and I have it's called a road ID because I ride my bike, but it's got my name and phone number and three contact numbers. Actually, it doesn't have my number because they don't need to call me, but if I'm wearing it, so they can call my daughter or my son if I have a problem. And I don't just wear it when I ride; I wear it all the time. So I guess if I had an emergency, people know who to call. And I don't have any special health conditions, but I just think an extra measure of safety is always helpful. So, um, thank you again, Tricia. I'd like to remind our viewers to visit our webpage at aarp.org/Michigan to see our other virtual events. You have Tricia's information if you have follow-up questions from today's event, and we will look forward to seeing you at more virtual events. And thank you for starting 2022 off with us. Have a fantastic day and stay warm.